Well, hey, your story here locally has been making the rounds in social media and in the newspaper and on Facebook. So it's become a popular piece in the last 3 or 4 days here in Evansville.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, one of the things that John was asking me is, hey, like, how did you, why'd you decide to tell this story? And I was just like, well, I mean, this is something I've always known about. I just didn't really have the platform. And when our season ended last year collegially, I usually go to my editor because I still do writing for ESPN.com, clearly. And it's usually like, hey, like what are the stories we're going to work on this off season? And most of them, they're almost always college football. Um, and so I had my typical list, and then one day I think I might have been at the gym, and I texted my editor and I said, "Hey, like, let me call you tomorrow. I've got something that you're not going to believe, and this is a phone call story. This is not I'm going to text you about this, like." So let's chat it out. And, I explained it to him, sent him the image of the protest. And it was like, okay, wow, like this is absurd, right? And so they were on board and, obviously here we are.
Yeah, that was my first question for you is how did the pitch go? What was the reaction to it? And were you surprised by how receptive they were?
I was not surprised by how receptive they were. So my editor, Chris Almeida, he used to work at The Ringer. He writes fantastic pieces himself. Like he is a very good editor, very good journalist. And so I knew when I pitched it to him, I was like, I'm not going to have any problem with you. Like, I knew he was going to be on board, and he had a really good time working on this with me and deserves a lot of credit as well. And so I knew he was going to be on board. And honestly, like as it went up the chain, I got no pushback. Like this was like, yes, like this is an incredible story. A story that I would say one of my bosses, Ryan Cantor O'Mealy, he understands that I should say he understands my Evansville connection and how, thorough, I guess, like my knowledge of just random Evansville things are, given that, it is my second home. And so he was like, yes, like you are the guy to tell this story. Do it. Let us know how it goes. So.
Well, I was going to ask you about that, your Evansville connection. I know you make a lot of references and shout outs to Evansville and the Purple Aces on your appearances on Around the Horn and other ESPN shows. You've tweeted and posted on Instagram things about Una Pizza and the
Oh
Purple
yeah.
Aces. What is your Evansville connection and your relationship with the city for those who don't know?
I had Una Pizza twice this
You
weekend
did.
when I was in
Okay.
town. Steve's, by the way. Steve's is my first choice,
That's the
Una two,
one.
and then I would say Covert.
Okay.
If we're ranking them. I haven't been to the new one across from Mo's house. Shout out Mo. My connection, so I guess if we're going way back,
Okay.
my great grandfather is Joshua Lyles, who founded Lyles Station
Okay.
next to Princeton.
Yeah.
My grandfather was Carl Lyles Sr., longtime EVSC board member, started off at Lincoln High School, all black Lincoln High School, went to Wrights, was, I believe, assistant principal at Central for a time. Um, I mean, when I go see my aunt and uncle, my aunt, she was a counselor at North High School. A lot of people still know the name Edith Lyles.
Okay.
She's one of my favorite people on the planet. Um, my dad went to Wrights. He graduated from USI, worked in local radio, started off in Evansville, and obviously did very well for himself nationally. He's in the Black Radio Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
And my I still hear to this day, like if I do talk about Evansville on Around the Horn, or they see I've got a helmet back here, Evansville Aces football helmet that I bought
Nice.
years ago. Um, that'll pop up on College Football Live. You'll see it on Friday.
Okay.
Um, that I'll have people reach out to me. I have a Facebook account that I don't use, but like I needed in this case to reach out to people to find
Yeah.
for this particular story. That'll be like, hey, are you related to, my grandfather? And then they'll ask me about Emmett Lyles as well, who taught at Dexter for many years. So if there is an educator from Evansville with a last name Lyles or a farmer, I am probably related to them.
Yeah.
So that's sort of my tie. We always went to Evansville around Christmas time growing up, I would say,
Mhm.
as well as, some Father's Day weekends as well. And then as I got older, I would just make my own trips up, visit my aunt and uncle, as well as a couple of cousins of mine. And it is a place that I would say, I always tell people, I'm born and raised in Atlanta, but I did a lot of growing in Evansville. Like a lot of what has shaped me as an adult, was in Evansville. So I mean, it's always comforting for me, whether I'm driving up or I mostly fly up now. But when I get there, I don't feel like I've traveled. I just feel like I've come home.
Yeah.
And that's usually friends and family that are from there. It's never, hey, when are you coming back to Evansville? When are you visiting? It's when are you coming home? So it is very much a second home for me.
Well, that's quite the resume then, of all the friends and family that you have here, going back a lot of generations. One thing that I noticed in your story, you mentioned Don Mattingly, Bob Greasy, Lily King, Bossy Field, obviously A League of Their Own, the West Side Nightclub Fall Festival. And I feel
Yep.
like as somebody who I'm not a local in terms of being born and raised here, but I've lived here almost 20 years. When
Mhm.
people ask me about Evansville, those are all the things I say as well. I'm like, do you know who Don Mattingly is, or Bob Greasy, or Lily King? Or have you heard of this, or you heard of that? What is
Yeah.
it about this town and its, I guess its stars and its athletes and the famous people who come from here that people like to talk about?
I think it's interesting because, and I describe Evansville as one of America's biggest small towns,
Sure.
right? Um, I have always just been intrigued, even from a young age. And this is something that I think has helped me in my writing career specifically, is I always sort of felt that sense of pride. And I think Evansville has, in many ways, always been a place that I think, and it's not for me to say, right? Because I was not born in Evansville. I'm not from there. I did not grow up the majority of my life there. But given the time, which is a lot of time spent there, I have always just sort of gathered that, like people from Evansville are obviously, as I mentioned in the story, a proud people. They are perfectly fine if they never leave. Some, not all. I'm not going to speak for everybody.
Sure.
But the ones that do get out and do something in the world, it almost to me has always seemed like people take that as you are representing us, so we can stay here and enjoy the life that we have. And I have always sort of felt that myself when I do television and I've got, whether it's the sleeves back here or
Right,
that
right.
that Evansville helmet or whatever the case may be. And that has always been very meaningful to me as well. Like the amount of messages that I get about just like, hey man, we appreciate how much you love us.
Hmm.
Um, like that means something to me because I also believe I would not be here without Evansville. Like one of the first features I ever wrote in my career. In fact, it is the first feature that I ever wrote in my career was on the plane crash of 77. Like
Right,
my first day at SB Nation, I went to my bosses. I said, hey, almost a year down the line, it's going to be the 40th anniversary of this plane crash that, for whatever reason, does not have a wider notoriety nationally than it should.
right.
So that's the first feature I told. It helped me establish a relationship with the university. Bob Pristash over there, I owe so much to Bob Pristash.
Mhm.
That allowed me to develop a relationship with the university. So I'm on the bus with the UE basketball team in 2019, and I'm at Lexington. I'm the only national media person, really non-Kentucky
Yeah.
person that was there for that game.
This is when
Um,
Evansville's basketball team beat the number one ranked Kentucky
yes.
Wildcats. Yeah.
And that right there, that story, that changed my life because that's one of the stories that ESPN called me and said, "Hey, how did you do that? Like, can you do that for us?" Um, and so there's that. And then, one of the first things I wrote at ESPN was about the sleeves and the lore of it and,
Right.
things like that. And so it's always just been something. And and to me, it's like very fitting for me again, because of like how I do feel like um I grew as a person, how much my family does mean to me, that Evansville has played such a part in my own career. And I will never personally be able to pay Evansville back. I actually do feel that way. And I also don't feel like Evansville, would ever say, hey, you owe us something. I
Sure.
don't. And I love that about it. And I love at the pride that the people of that city hold. I think more people should be proud of where they're from the way that the people of Evansville are proud of where they're from.
What has been the reaction over the last few days that you've received from people, obviously in Evansville, but from across the country who maybe have connections to the city or the university or their families from here when they've seen your story and your piece pop up on ESPN.com?
I would say mostly from people from Evansville. It's been again, I've just gotten a lot of thank yous.
Sure.
Because I think at this point, like people are pretty like familiar that, if there's something that needs to be said, like, at least in terms of things as it pertains to Evansville, like I'm gonna say it or I'm gonna tell it, right? I would say nationally, a lot of people are just like, wow, okay, like so like this is like not BS, like this isn't a thing that
Hmm.
actually happened.
Hmm.
I'm like, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
just it's interesting. I think the biggest thing, though, that has stood out among this entire thing has just been even when I spoke with people locally, and I feel like I obviously got this message across in the story because it's one of the last lines of it, is that the image of the protest and the disdain or perceived disdain for Madonna and what she said is not how Evansville remembers that.
Right.
Um, and so I hope one of the things that people did take away from it was like, hey, like I personally think it's okay if you had an issue with what she said. I felt like she was being tongue in cheek. I tried to talk to Kurt Loder
Hmm.
because I wanted to know, like, hey, man, can you recite to me how she said it? Because to me, that makes sort of a huge difference. When I read that,
Yeah.
because growing up, I was like, Prague's nice. Like my sister did an orchestra camp there or something like that. Like it
Right.
ain't a bad place.
Yeah.
So like I felt like, all right, she's being tongue in cheek. I don't really think she means anything by it. And clearly she did have a good time. Now that doesn't mean that she had a great experience with everybody there and vice versa, because that's not how anybody is,
Hmm.
right? I mean, I'm sure someone's met me and decided, hey, like Harry Lyles, God, he stinks to high heavens, and they might have caught me on a bad day, and I just wasn't as polite as they wanted me to be. And so I did want to sort of show, like, hey, like among all the people that I spoke with, I spoke to a lot of people off the record, like. There are things in this story that I found out that like blew my mind that did not make it, and I will keep until I die
Okay.
that were very interesting, like very interesting.
Yeah.
But I just again, I always go into something like, hey, like this is the broad idea that I've got, and I felt like again, I came away from this learning like, okay, this was not nearly as contentious, and a lot of people sort of, I don't want to say they had it out for Madonna, but I will also say in my research, which I guess I know I'm getting long-winded here, but I read every Courier and Press, and for the youngsters out there, like they were two separate papers at the time. I read every single article that mentioned her name in either paper from January 1st, 1991 until December 31st, 1992. Like it took me a long time to go through all of that and sift through it. Like my Google document for this story is like 50 pages or something like that, and that's just links. Um, but I took away again from this that just obviously she was basically the most famous person on the planet
Right.
at
Yes.
that time,
Yeah.
like without question, right? I call her the Queen of Pop in the first section. She was known as the Material Girl at that point. Later the Queen of Pop, but just seeing how unfairly I would say people were towards her, and I say that because in my research, I read so many extra articles in which her name was mentioned that had absolutely nothing to do with her.
Mm.
And people would just drag her name through the mud and say just absurd things about her that obviously, no one's ever going to have to apologize for. But I thought that that part of it was interesting. And I hope that that's something that people took away from it, which is that, hey, like a lot of the way that she was and is still talked about was misogynistic and sexist, and it's pretty nasty.
Mm. Yeah. Definitely. Well, Harry, I really appreciate your time today talking about this story that came out just on Monday. I mean, I opened up my ESPN.com page that day for the first time just to check the news, and I see an illustrative collage of Madonna, Bossy Field, the Evansville skyline, and I'm like, wait a second. And I see this headline that reads, how a league of their own started a feud between Madonna and Evansville, Indiana. And I'm like, wait, I know this story, I think. But then I click on it, and so then I start sharing it around the office and talking to people. I'm like, did you guys see this story? And like, oh yeah, everyone's talking about it. And that was just a few days ago. So you've made quite the waves here, at least in the tri-state area. So congratulations on that.
No, I appreciate it, and thank you for having me. Anytime, really. I'm always interested in anything Evansville. So,
Anything else Evans related coming down the pike or on your to-do list in the next few weeks, months, or even years? Stories that need to be told?
you know, it's funny you say that because I told my editor when we did this, I was like, hey, like, I want this to be the last of the things that I know
Yeah.
of Evansville. This is the last one that has already happened that I can tell. I want the next one to be David Ragland and his story leading Evansville back into the NCAA tournament.
Yeah.
Like that is one that I have even
Yeah.
like personal connection like ties with.
Hmm.
So that I want that to be the next one. That is my hope.
How does Coach Ragland feel about that? Any pressure there?
No, whenever we talk about it, it's not an if, it's a when.
Right, right,
It's
right.
a when.
Yeah.
So
Good. Well, that's great. That's awesome. Well, thanks again for talking with me today. It was a real treat. Nice to meet you. Thanks for being so generous with your time. And thanks for telling just such a great story about a really cool time in Evansville's history. I really appreciate that.
absolutely, Kenton, anytime, man.